It's really easy when you hear stories like mine to blame the parents. When you hear about the troubled teen industry and legal kidnappings, things like that, automatically it's very easy to assume like, oh, your parents are the ones who put you into this. They're the ones who know what's happening to you and they're keeping you there. And it's a lot more complicated than that. Probably the most commented thing on that video is something about how I should feel about my parents. And to be honest, I don't hold anything that happened against my parents. I should specify, parent. I only have one surviving blood family member, and that is my mother. My grandparents raised me, and they were alive when I went through all of this, but I also want to be clear that I don't hold it against them either. Kind of the way the troubled teen industry works is when you seek out help for one of your kids, like if you're a school or if you're a parent who's just like on the internet, like looking for solutions, or keep in mind, like for my personal story, like this all happened in the early 2000s, like the internet was still fairly new. So most of the time where you find yourself is in connection with what's called an educational consultant. An educational consultant works with your school and your parents and these facilities to place your child. And these consultants are just as much a part of the TTI system as the system and the treatment centers are themselves, because they get kickbacks off of getting kids admitted into these programs. So they benefit financially from having you stay there, having you do more of these programs, and spending as long as possible in them. So if you're like a regular principal who doesn't usually deal with, troubled kids, like they like to call them, or if you're a parent who's in distress because your child is, in your mind, unmanageable, these educational consultants can be extremely manipulative in showing your parents these like beautiful looking facilities from the outside that they think are going to treat their kids really well. And then once their kids actually show up to the facilities, we're not allowed to talk to our parents about what's happening to us. The only form of communication I ever had with my parents, and this was in the most form of communication, was once a week family therapy with a therapist who works for the program with their finger essentially on the call button and writing letters that were faxed or like scanned into computers and then emailed to our parents. These letters were thoroughly screened for any mention of any of the maltreatment that we were going through. So if I tried to tell my family, who were under the impression that they had sent me somewhere that was truly helping me, if I tried to tell them that these people were actually hurting me, they would just bring me my letter back and say, write another one. This was also, like I said, like 15 years ago, where, there was no information about the TTI, and anyone who was speaking out about it was just deemed as like a salty kid who didn't like that they got sent away for acting out. Now, there are so many more survivor stories out there. There's so many more resources. It's so much more widely known that this exists and this is a problem. So I do have a lot less empathy for parents of today who send their kids to these facilities, because at this point, we should know better as a society. But there are so many kids who get out of these places, their parents don't know what happened to them for years, and then their parents wind up in therapy too because they thought they were helping their kid. Meanwhile, they were funding them getting hurt the whole time. Important to remember when you hear stories like mine that there is a lot of nuance that I can't fit into a, rapid fire TikTok where I'm trying to, do the trend of telling a terrible story after a girl is trying to chop some garlic for some pesto. TTI system is a system that affects entire families. Most notably the kids who wind up in the system, but also it doesn't just end there. It extends to the parents as well. It's something that's important to go into learning about with a really open mind and also empathy for multiple sides of the equation.